There is a sentence I say about 400 times a summer, and I said it to her at 6:40 in the morning. Down is optional, up is mandatory. 6 words. I stand at the South Kaibab trailhead most summer mornings and say them to almost everybody who walks past me, and I have said them so many times that I can hear what has happened to them. They have stopped sounding like a warning. They sound like a slogan, like something printed on a mug in the gift shop, and people nod at them the way you nod at a flight attendant pointing out the exits. I watched her nod at them. Then I watched her go down the trail, and I have thought about those 6 words every single morning since because they were completely true and she was completely capable of understanding them. And neither of those things helped. Welcome back to Doomed Departures. What you are about to hear is a composite story. It is built from real trails, real temperatures, real trailhead procedure, and a real mechanism that kills experienced hikers in this canyon specifically. But the people in it are composites. No real person is named. I'm going to call myself Cole Whitaker. And the woman Dolores, because she deserves a name rather than a case number, and her family deserves not to hear the real one. This is a dramatization. The canyon is not, and the mechanism is not, and if you take nothing else from the next 20 minutes, I would like you to take that one piece of knowledge, because it is the part that almost nobody knows, and it is the part that got her. I am 27. This is my 3rd season at Grand Canyon and my first with full backcountry duty. And I grew up in Flagstaff, 40 miles from the rim, which means I have been coming to this canyon since before I could carry my own pack. I also know exactly how little that counts for with a certain kind of visitor, and I knew it before her, and I know it better now. South Kaibab is the trail people take for the views, and it earns that because it runs down the spine of a ridge and the canyon opens on both sides of you the whole way. It is also the more serious of the 2 corridor trails in summer because there is no water on it. None. Not a spigot, not a stream, not a tap at a rest house. Everything you drink on South Kaibab you carried in on your back, and everything you did not carry is a problem you will meet later, going uphill in the afternoon. That morning, the rim was 92 degrees. 1,400 feet down, the inner gorge was already past 110 and climbing toward 114. That is the entire point I spend my summers trying to make. The rim and the gorge are 2 different climates stacked on top of each other, and a person standing on the rim in the pleasant early sun is not sampling the weather they are about to walk into. They are sampling the weather they are leaving. The first rung of this was not me, it was Nadia. There is a table at that trailhead most summer mornings with a preventive search and rescue volunteer behind it, and that program is one of the best things this park does. They are not there to stop anybody, they are there to ask a short list of questions, and the questions are not idle. How much water are you carrying? What salty food do you have? What is your plan? What time are you turning around? Nadia has been doing it for years, and she is 58, and she has more canyon in her than most of the staff. And she asked Dolores all 4. Dolores answered the first one. 3 liters, plenty, said, with the satisfaction of a person who knows she has the right answer. Then Nadia asked about salt and got a wave. Then a turnaround time and got the wave again, pleasantly, the way you decline a sample at a grocery store. The plan question never really got asked, because by then Dolores had decided what kind of interaction this was and had started walking. I picked it up at the sign, which is rung 2, and I gave her the math. I told her that going down uses about 1/3 of the energy of coming up, and that people reach the bottom feeling they have done the hard part when they have done the cheap part. That the climb out is 3 times the work and twice the heat, because the descent happens in the morning and the ascent happens in the afternoon, and that is not a coincidence. That is the shape of the day. That by early afternoon, the gorge would be running 20 degrees hotter than the rim she was standing on. I gave her the actual numbers because numbers land better than adjectives. She listened to all of it. She was not rude, she did not interrupt, she let me finish, and then she told me she had been hiking this canyon since 1974, before I was born, and asked me, with a small smile, how long the rookie had been working here. That is rung 3, and I'm telling you about it now, in the first few minutes, because it is not the climax of anything. It is not a dramatic turning point. It was 10 seconds at a trailhead sign at 6:40 in the morning. It was said lightly, almost warmly, and then it was over and we both moved on. I have replayed it more times than I would like to admit, and here is what I have landed on. She was not trying to insult me. That is the thing. In her mind, she was gently correcting a category error. She thought I was giving beginner advice to a beginner, and she was letting me know, kindly, that she was not one, so that I could go and spend my morning on somebody who actually needed it. And she was not lying about any of it. She had hiked this canyon since 1974. She had come back more than a dozen times. She was retired and fit, and she moved like somebody who had spent decades in the mountains. And when she told me she knew this trail, she was telling me the plain truth. That is the part I need you to hold on to for the rest of this, because everything else in this story depends on it. She was not a fool. She was not unprepared in the way most of the people I worry about are unprepared. She was genuinely, verifiably experienced, and her experience was the thing that killed her. Because here is rung 4, and rung 4 is the whole episode. I told her specifically to eat salty food on the way down, not later. On the way down, steadily, along with the water. I said it plainly because it is the single most useful piece of advice I'm able to give anybody on that trail, and because almost nobody expects to hear it. And she laughed, not cruelly, and told me that she had been drinking water on this trail since I was in diapers. She was describing the exact mechanism that would kill her, and she was saying it as a boast. Let me explain, because this is the moat around this story, and it is the reason I still say all this out loud 400 times a summer. When you sweat, you do not just lose water. You lose sodium, which is salt, and in heat like this, you lose an enormous amount of it, hour after hour, and your body needs it in a fairly narrow range to run your nerves and your muscles and your brain. Now, if you replace the water you lost and you do not replace the salt, something quietly goes wrong that most people have never heard of. The sodium remaining in your body gets diluted further and further by all the water you are dutifully drinking. It is a condition called hyponatremia, and out here on a long, hot hike, it has a specific name: exercise-associated hyponatremia, and it does something that sounds like a contradiction. It makes a person who is drinking plenty of water very sick. And here is the cruelest part. In the early stages, it looks almost exactly like dehydration. Nausea, headache, weakness, confusion. So the person feels bad, correctly identifies that they feel bad, and does the thing they were taught their whole life to do, which is drink more water. And the water makes it worse. Every disciplined, well-intentioned swallow makes it worse, and they are doing what they believe to be right all the way down. Now here is why she is not stupid. In 1974, the advice really was drink water. That was it. That was the whole message, and it was good advice. Because the thing that was killing people most of the time was straightforward dehydration, and getting fluids into hikers saved lives. The understanding of what happens to an endurance athlete or a long-distance hiker who drinks large amounts of plain water in extreme heat came later, out of decades of research, a lot of it from marathons and a meaningful amount of it from this exact canyon, because this canyon generates the data. The advice changed because we learned something. She learned the canyon in 1974, and she was, in every way that matters, still running the 1974 version of it, with total confidence, because it had worked every single time for 40 years. The trail did not change. What we know about what the trail does to people changed. She was not out of shape. She was out of date. Let me stop and ask you something, and I am asking as somebody who is 27 and gets waved off a lot. When was the last time you were sure you already knew something and did not check? Because you had known it for so long that checking felt insulting? Not a thing you were ignorant about, a thing you were an expert in. Tell me in the comments, because expertise is not permanent. It is perishable, and the more real it is, the less often anybody thinks to refresh it, and that is the exact gap this canyon lives in. There was one more thing at that trailhead, and it is the one I think about at 2 in the morning. I offered to log her hiking plan. That is a thing we can do, informally, an ordinary act of paperwork that takes 90 seconds where I write down who you are and where you are going and roughly when you expect to be back out, so that somebody knows to notice if you are not. It is not surveillance, and it is not a permit, and it costs nothing. She told me she did not need a babysitter. That declined offer is the lifeline in this story, and it was declined at 6:42 in the morning before she had taken a single step downhill in perfect health, in good spirits, by a woman who is completely capable of walking that trail. Everything that happened later is downstream of the fact that nobody had a reason to expect her anywhere. She went down. And the first thing I had told her fired immediately, which is that the descent is borrowed and not free. She felt wonderful, of course she did. Everybody does. The morning was still cool by canyon standards. The trail was dropping away underneath her. The views on South Kaibab in the early light are among the best in the country, and her legs were doing what her legs had always done. That feeling is not a sign that things are going well. That feeling is the loan being issued. Every foot of easy descent is a foot that has to be repurchased later at 3 times the price in heat that has not arrived yet by a body that has been spending the whole time. She reached Cedar Ridge, and rung 5 came up the trail toward her. A man on his way out, coming up, told her what it was like down there. That is a specific kind of information you cannot get any other way, because he was not predicting, he was reporting. He had been in it. And she thanked him and told him he had started too late, which is a way of saying that his experience did not apply to her. And it is the single most common way I watch people discard a warning. They do not argue with the facts. They disqualify the source. Below Cedar Ridge, the second thing fired. The gorge stopped being weather and became terrain. There's a point on that trail where heat stops being something you are in and becomes something you are climbing through, radiating off the walls and up off the rock under your boots, and the number on a phone becomes irrelevant because your body is not experiencing air temperature anymore. It is experiencing an oven with a floor. Somewhere on the switchbacks, a mule string came up and the wrangler said one sentence to her. Those wranglers do not chat. They have run that trail more times than anyone, and they say almost nothing. And when they do say something, you should treat it as a telegram. She waved at him. That was rung 6, and it was the last one anybody offered. Then came Skeleton Point, which is the hinge. Skeleton Point is the last honest turnaround on that trail. It is where you first see the river, and the Park Service is unusually direct about this stretch in summer. And the turnaround time I had given her at the trailhead came and went while she was standing there looking at that view. And she kept going. Not because she was suffering, and not because she had lost her judgment. That came later. She kept going because she felt excellent, and because the whole morning had confirmed her, and because turning around at the time a 27-year-old had assigned her would have meant that the 27-year-old was right. That is all. That is the entire reason. Every mile of the ascent that eventually killed her was purchased at Skeleton Point for the price of not conceding a point to a rookie. Below Skeleton Point, the third thing fired. And this is where the story gets genuinely sad, because she did everything she thought was correct. She drank. Steadily and generously, more than most people would, because she was disciplined and she had been taught that water is the answer and she was not going to be caught short. And she got worse. She sat and rested and drank and stood up feeling wronger than when she sat down. And she could not possibly have made sense of that, because in 40 years, nothing like it had ever happened. And the one intervention she had absolute faith in was the one quietly making it worse every time she used it. Somewhere in there, the fourth thing fired, and it is the beat that hurts. Another hiker passed her, saw a woman sitting off the side of the trail, noted that she seemed tired and kept walking. That hiker did nothing wrong. I want to say that clearly in case they ever hear this, because that is a completely normal thing to see on that trail, and a completely normal reaction to it. But confusion, from the outside, looks exactly like being tired. That is what I am trained to watch for, and it is nearly impossible to spot in a stranger. Someone in early trouble is not raving. They are sitting quietly, answering simple questions a beat slow, saying they are fine and meaning it. The signal is small, and it looks like an ordinary hot afternoon on a hard trail. She stopped finally in shade. She got it right at the end, and it was too late, which is the part I find hardest. The fifth thing is the one I am not going to walk you through. The body has a set of priorities in heat like that, and it defends them in order. And eventually, it stops being able to defend the core. And there is nothing about that process that anyone listening needs described. She was a person, not a diagram, and this channel has a line it does not cross. The alert came from a descending hiker with a satellite messenger hours after she was last seen upright. The response was immediate. It was also slow, and both are true at once, because the inner gorge on a 114-degree afternoon is a place where a helicopter cannot always help. And when it cannot, the answer is people on foot, walking down into the exact conditions that caused the emergency. That is not a delay anybody chose. That is the canyon. They found her below Skeleton Point near the trail, in the shade she had finally accepted. The ruling was heat-related, consistent with the mechanism I have spent this whole episode describing, the one I had told her about at 6:40 in the morning in about 11 words. If this one taught you something you did not know, then do the small thing that carries it further. Like this video so it reaches somebody the night before their hike instead of the week after. Subscribe so you are here for the next one, not for me and not for a number on a screen. Do it so that one more experienced hiker somewhere hears a piece of advice that contradicts what they learned decades ago and does the hardest thing an expert can do, which is check. Here is the whole of it, and it took me a season to be able to say it without heat in my voice. She was right about almost everything. She was strong, she was experienced. She had hiked this canyon more than a dozen times and had never once needed rescuing, and every single thing she knew about this trail was true in 1974. I am not going to pretend she was some clueless tourist because she was not, and the story is worse than that. She was a genuinely skilled person running 40-year-old information, and she defended it the way skilled people do, confidently, because it had never failed her. The trail did not change. The canyon is the same rock it was in 1974 and the same rock it was a million years before that. What changed is us. We learned something in the intervening decades at real cost out of real bodies on this real trail, about what heat and water and salt actually do to a person, and that knowledge is the only thing anybody has added to this canyon in 50 years. It is free. It weighs nothing. She was handed it at a trailhead sign by somebody young enough to be dismissed, and she declined it, and the tragedy is not that she was too proud to take advice. It is that she was too experienced to think she needed any. I was back at that sign the next morning at 6:40. Same sign, same 6 words, saying them to a new set of people who mostly nodded at them like a slogan. I am not bitter about that. It is the job, and most of them come back up, and I will never know which ones only came back up because they heard me. That is the deal you make. Down is optional, up is mandatory, and the only thing I can do is stand there and keep saying it to people who have every right to walk past me, and hope that this morning it sounds like a warning to somebody. Next time we leave the dry heat behind for cold water, where being experienced is no protection at all, and the mistake is measured in seconds instead of hours. Until then, if you are the most experienced person in your group, understand that this is the specific position in which people stop being warned, because nobody warns the expert. You will have to do it yourself. Go and check whether what you know is still true. I have gone back over that morning more times than I can count, and every time I land in the same place. She was right about almost everything. She was strong, she was experienced, she had walked into this canyon more than a dozen times and always walked back out. And every single thing she knew about this trail was true. It was true in 1974. That is the part that took me a season to be able to say without something tightening in my chest. She was not a careless tourist, and she was not out of shape. She was a genuinely skilled person running 40-year-old information, and she trusted it the way skilled people trust the one thing that has never failed them. The trail did not change. This canyon is the same rock it was in 1974, the same rock it was a million years before that. What changed is us. We learned something slowly, at a cost measured in real people on this real trail, about what heat and water and salt actually do to a body. And that knowledge is very nearly the only thing anybody has added to this canyon in 50 years. It is free. It weighs nothing. You can carry it down without it ever showing up on your back. And she was handed it, at a sign, at 6:40 in the morning, by somebody young enough to wave off, and she said no. The tragedy was never that she was too proud to take advice. It is that she was too experienced to believe she still needed any. That is the thing I want to leave you with, because it is bigger than this canyon. There is a specific place in every group where the warnings stop, and it is the most experienced person standing in it. Nobody warns the expert. We assume they already know, and most of the time they do. And the one time the world quietly changed underneath them, there is no one left whose job it is to tell them. If you are that person, the strong one, the one who has done it 100 times, understand that the checking is now yours to do because it is not coming from anybody else. I was back at that sign the next morning at 6:40. Same 6 words. Down is optional, up is mandatory. I say them to people who have every right to walk straight past me, and most of them do. And most of them come back up fine, and I will never know which ones came back. Only because something in those 6 words landed. That is the deal you make. You stand there and you say the true thing to people who are certain they already know it, and you hope this is the morning it sounds like a warning again. So do one thing for me. If you are ever sure, really sure, that you already know something, go and check whether it is still true. And if this reached you, like this video and subscribe, so it finds the next person who is one warning away from listening. This has been Doomed Departures. Stay safe, and we will see you on the next one.